There are a lot of overclocks in Deep Rock Galactic. There's 160 of them now, in fact. Some people will tell you that some overclocks are awful. Others will tell you that those same overclocks are broken. Some will organize all the overclocks into neat little tier lists. I'm not here to do any of that. I'm not going to tell you whether an overclock is strong or weak. I'm here to tell you the specific strengths and weaknesses of every overclock, and how smoothly you can expect your experience with it to be based on your playstyle. To make sure I'm speaking from a place of intellectual honesty, I didn't just review the stats and crunch the numbers. I played an entire mission with every single overclock. Firstly, let's lay down the ground rules. Each of these missions was done in solo mode on Hazard 4. I'm doing it solo to avoid disproportionate contribution from teammates and all the uncontrollable variables they introduce. I tried to avoid mutators as much as possible to avoid skewing my experience, and while I wasn't opposed to doing events where I found them, I tried to avoid Betsy in particular, as the extra firepower would have once again skewed my experience with the overclock. I paired each weapon with a complementary secondary build if that was possible, but other times there's just not any synergy to be had, in which case I had a fallback build I used. Now, there are too many overclocks in Deep Rock Galactic for one video, so I'm going to be going one set of weapons at a time, one primary on one secondary on one class per video. The most fitting place to start, I feel, is with Deep Rock Galactic's poster child class, the Scout, and Scout's most iconic weapon is the M1000. Nah, I'm just kidding, it's the GK2, so we're going to start with that one first, and pair it with the Boomstick. First up on our list is gas rerouting. This is a simple clean overclock that boosts your fire rate and reload speed. It's a clean, so there's not really a whole lot to say about it. It's just a nice little accelerant that gives a slight bump to DPS and reduces your reload downtime. It's a nice simple booster for when you just want the gun to do what it does, but a little faster and more streamlined. Next, we went right from the basic simple clean to the more transformative burst fire overclock. This is the new one that was added in Season 5. It gives the GK2 a 3-round burst and a small bump to stun chance and base damage, along with a slight mag size increase, though it reduces your rate of fire significantly and makes the weapon semi-auto instead of full auto. It's not really a bad overclock, it's perfectly usable, and while it makes the weapon a little more ammo hungry and makes shooting swarmers and shockers significantly less ammo efficient, it's not bad. It's just not really practical. Burst fire divides your fire rate by more than 3, so even with the damage buff, you're at best breaking even DPS wise. Anything that dies in one burst's worth of bullets is killed faster, but that's not a whole lot of creatures, and everything else is killed a little slower as a result. Technically, it's a decent total damage boost thanks to the damage bump, but the fact that you can't ration your shots except in groups of 3 makes that benefit tenuous at best, especially considering you're just a hair short of several important breakpoints, and you basically need to fully rely on your secondary or teammates for swarmers and shockers. That's not to say it's bad, but it's hard to use to full effect, and the benefits are relatively minor in comparison. Up next is Bullets of Mercy. This is one of those ones that people used to talk about a lot, and I can understand why. It gives you a whopping 50% damage bonus if the target has basically any negative status effect. This makes you melt Praetorians and Oppressors very quickly, but most of the smaller stuff is going to die before any useful status effects can actually be applied. The main thing that makes this overclock really good is the fact that it can activate off of its own stun, which is a decent chance of applying if you take the stun upgrade for the weak point hits. It can also trigger off of Bosco's electric rounds and the fire upgrade for the Boomstick, which gives solo scouts multiple options to make quick work of tougher enemies. The main thing holding this overclock back though is the 40% reduction in mag size. You're going to be reloading constantly with this overclock, to the point where combat with packs of grunts becomes miserable. This likely won't be much of an issue outside of solo play with teammates to handle it, but keep in mind that you're heavily specializing into tougher target elimination if you run this overclock. It's a decent pick, but it's cumbersome to use. I can only imagine how much worse it would have been for me if I hadn't taken the reload speed upgrade, and the stun chance upgrade is also pretty vital for making it work consistently on your own, though technically it's not necessary, especially in a full team and with other sources of debuffs. Either way, you'll get a lot of power out of this if you use it right, but there's an equal amount of setup that certainly justifies the return. Next on the list is Compact Ammo, a clean overclock that gives a good magazine size boost and recoil reduction. This is a nice overclock for anyone who likes to hold down the trigger. The lower recoil means more shots are going to land, and the extended mag size means you can hold down for longer before reloading. Other than that, it's a clean, there's not really much to say. Moving right along to another clean overclock, Homebrew Powder. This one randomizes your damage between 80% and 140% per shot. In theory, this is an average of 20% damage boost, and the inconsistency isn't all that noticeable, but if you do get a low roll, the bullet won't one-shot a swarmer, which, depending on your loadout, could be pretty bad. Other than that, it's a solid clean, even if it is a slight bit inconsistent for those who want to tap fire. Now back into the interesting ones. Electrifying Reload. This one gives you an ammo and mag size penalty, but it makes your bullets electrocute enemies when you reload. That sounds pretty good on paper, and there's a couple of things holding it back though. First, the debuff doesn't stack at all. 10 bullets into one target gives the same debuff as 1. That means you need to spread your fire before reloading. Second, you're going to be reloading a lot, which means the reload speed upgrade is very important. The damage over time isn't all that good against tougher targets, although the slow is nice, and if you're the kind of scout who likes spreading their fire over a swarm, then this is definitely the overclock for you. If you're more of a focus down one target at a time kind of scout, then this overclock doesn't really hurt your ability to do that all that much, but you might want to try something else. AI Stability Engine is another interesting pick. You get a small damage and rate of fire penalty in exchange for basically removing the gun's recoil and spread per shot altogether, along with a hefty 50% weak point damage bonus. If you're the kind of scout who loves nailing weak points from across the cave, this is the GK2 overclock for you. It's also great at dealing with Praetorians and Oppressors. The better you are at aiming, the better the overclock is, but the damage and rate of fire penalties mean that if you can't consistently hit weak points, you're probably going to be better off taking something else. Finally, we have Overclocked Firing Mechanism. More fire rate, more recoil. It's a pretty simple balanced overclock that gives you a decent DPS boost if you can handle it. The recoil can be tough to work with, but once you realize that it only kicks so far, it can be pretty easy to line up your shots from a fair distance away. The only other drawback is that the overclock's fire rate is so high it makes it difficult to tap fire just one bullet. And now we move on to the Boomstick, Scout's signature secondary. For the entire GK2 run, I was using special powder, so I figure I'll tackle that one first. It's a good mobility overclock that allows you to move around a lot, and since it's clean, it doesn't hamper the weapon much, although it does have one major drawback. You can't turn it off. That means you can't jump and shoot something like a Mactera without getting launched backwards, or if you do it wrong, straight down, which can seriously injure you since fall damage is based off of speed and not height. Once you get used to that though, it's a nice tool to have to break your falls or just move faster while the grapple is on cooldown. Now double barrel is very different. Formerly a clean, this was reworked a while back into an unstable and leans even more into absurd burst damage now. You only have the one shot in the mag, but the shell is strong enough to just about two-shot Praetorians, and the blast wave alone can kill grunts without you even aiming directly at them. The wider spread makes it fall off hard with range though, and the low ammo means you'll run dry quickly, but it's a very potent option for anyone who prefers to use the gun more as an emergency clearing tool than a full weapon. Compact Shells is another good clean, an ammo and reload boost that makes the Boomstick much better as a full weapon to rely on in swarms rather than just a fallback. The extra reload speed is also nice for those random waves of grunts that just never seem to stop. Now, Shaped Shells is an interesting one. It halves the spread of the gun, which is a lot more than it seems, in exchange for a slight ammo penalty. It's great for mid-range snipes on things like Mactera, and makes it easier to pick the dangerous grunt variants out of a crowd. It also makes absolutely sure that whatever is in front of you ends up very dead, being able to put even guards into melee kill range with just one shot. The reduced spread does make it worse against crowds and with blow-through, turning the gun from a close-range sweeper to a mid-range target deleter. Now, Jumbo Shells is an interesting one. At first glance, it seems like double barrel all over again, but there are some notable differences. First of all, Jumbo Shells doesn't come with a large spread penalty. That makes it better outside of point-blank range. Probably the biggest difference, though, is the way that they scale. Double barrel's effects are multiplicative, so a double barrel build will scale better with damage upgrades. Jumbo Shells' effects are additive, meaning it scales better with ammo upgrades. To put it more simply, while the two are similar, Jumbo Shells is better for people who want something really punchy that still has a good amount of ammo, while Double Barrel is more specialized and meant for those who want to lean as hard as possible into high damage at the expense of all ammo. Now, Stuffed Shells is an interesting one. Wait, hold on. What's with Boomstick overclocks and all being named after the shells? Anyway, this is another clean. It gives a small damage and pellet boost, which makes the gun hit a little harder and be a bit more consistent overall. It's a slightly higher damage output, and it's good for those who just want a little bit more punch out of the gun without having to sacrifice ammo for it. And that's it. That's every overclock for the GK2 and for the Boomstick. Some of them are fun, some of them are not my style, but none of them are good or bad. What's good for you is going to depend on your playstyle and not someone else's number crunching. I'm going to continue this series in the coming weeks with other overclocks and weapons, so please stay tuned for that if you're interested. See you then.